All right, guys, last one. Last one, and taking we'll start taking measure of the big picture rather than getting into the weeds on individual coaches that, by the way, mostly have little to no chance of actually being the hire. So this is going to be the last head coaching candidate profile for me, unless a dark horse candidate comes out of nowhere and the Seahawks actually seem interested, like Bruce Arians or somebody like that. So if that happens, okay. If it sounds like we might actually hire Bill Belichick, okay, I'll talk about it. But I that's not happening. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be the last one, and it is not a big name in the head coaching search circles right now. But I'm a little bit surprised that he's not at least getting a little bit of attention here. It's Lou Anarumo of the Cincinnati Bengals. This guy's been around a while. This guy's got a lot of experience. He's been a coordinator at the defensive side of the ball for 5 years, 58 years old when the season starts next year. And he hasn't done a good job every year he's been in Cincinnati, but when he's been given tools to work with, and remember, that Cincinnati Bengals team is not exactly a team that's going to give their coaches stuff to work with very well. He's done well. And he's got way more coordinator experience than most of these guys. And if you go back further into his resume, I'll just say it, there is a surprising amount of stability that you usually do not see in positional coaches or even coordinators. So let's talk about Big Lou here. Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator for the last 5 seasons. This last year did not go well, admittedly. Bad EPA ranking, .03 in the positive, which you don't want. 27th. Points per game allowed was 21st, so not good. Didn't have a good year in 2023, but the previous 2 years were quite good. 2022, Bengals make the AFC title game. They had an elite defense in points and a really good one in EPA. Negative .043 EPA on defense is really good, especially when you have a good offense like the Bengals do. Because when you're scoring a lot, you keep the pressure on other teams to have to score a lot, and usually they do a decent job of keeping up. So, pretty good work in 2022. Also did a decent job in 2021, average in points per game allowed, but good to, well, above average. I'm not going to go good, but a respectable EPA showing of 11th. So that tells me he did a pretty decent job in 2021 as well. And that Bengals team turned on the afterburners a little bit in the playoffs to make the Super Bowl and almost win it. So it was almost a Steve Spagnuolo type thing. Not that good, but pretty good nonetheless. So over the last 3 years, he's definitely made some bones in the coaching game. Now, the previous 2 years were really bad, especially 2019. But both years, they ranked low in points and EPA per play, but they didn't have much to work with. It were two terrible Bengals teams. This was the first year of Joe Burrow. This was the last year of Andy Dalton. They didn't have anything offensively. The defense got hung out to dry a lot, and you get what you get. So I'm not really going to hold that too much against him, but decent coordinator experience here for sure, I think. And you go back beyond his defensive coordinator experience. You've got 1 year in New York as the defensive back coach, 2018. Couple Pro Bowlers from that Giants defensive backfield that year. Landon Collins and Michael Thomas both made the Pro Bowl, I think. Michael Thomas may have made it as a special teamer, but regardless, B.W. Webb, Janoris Jenkins, Curtis Riley as well, and a couple other fairly prolific names. But check this out. He was the Miami Dolphins defensive backs coach from 2012 to 2017. It's not that often you see a positional coach hold a position for that long, I feel like. Now, some people might look at that and go, well, that's because he's not desirable. Nobody wants to promote him. Nobody wants to poach him. But he's also doing a good enough job to not get fired. And if you take a look at some of the defensive backs that passed through Miami during this period of time, you can see why. A lot of these guys were good. This was a period of time where the Dolphins were not a very good team, but their defensive backs for many of those years was a strength. They had guys like Xavier Howard, Rashad Jones, I think, made the Pro Bowl a couple times, Bobby McCain. There was Michael Thomas, who he brought with him to New York when he went there. Our old buddy Byron Maxwell. Brent Grimes, I think, made a Pro Bowl or two during this period of time. Jimmy Wilson, Cortland Finnegan, near the end of his career. I remember him. Chris Clemens, Nolan Carroll. So he did well overall, I feel like. Not well enough to get poached for a defensive coordinator job until the Bengals got him in 2019, but keeping your job for this long a period of time on a team that's pretty bad is notable. And I don't consider the Miami Dolphins to be some super lazy front office that would just leave a coach there because they don't feel like finding a new guy and they're just content with somebody who isn't like actively awful. No, I think this is in some ways kind of an indictment of the fact that he offered stability and they were happy to stick with him for as long as he was willing to be there. Like, again, some of these names are fairly prolific. Not necessarily when they were in Miami, but Xavier Howard, definitely prolific. Bobby McCain was somewhat prolific at his time. I remember Brent Grimes, maybe I remember more for his wife than I remember for Brent Grimes as a football player, but I remember Brent Grimes, the football player, as well. It was pretty good. So, not bad at all, not amazing. You'd prefer him to immediately get a coordinator job, but good. And before then, he was in college football with the Purdue Boilermakers as a defensive backs coach. So that's his origin from 2004 to 2011. So that's another long period of time spent at one stop. Purdue had some good teams during this era. I think they had one 11-win team. They might have had another 10-win team. The only defensive back he coached during this time, however, that made the NFL and made a big impact in the NFL was Bernard Pollard. You may remember him as a Baltimore Raven, and I think he ended up on the Texans at one point. He was the guy who injured Tom Brady and knocked him out for a whole season. I think he injured Gronkowski at one point. I think he injured, maybe it was Wes Welker. He was the guy who kept assassinating Patriots players, basically. And before then, he spent 3 years as a defensive back coach on the Marshall Thundering Herd, 2001 to 2003. And the only NFL relevant defensive back he coached during this 3 year period was the unfortunately named Chris Crocker. And yeah, that is about it. It's over 20 years of experience, but he spent so much time at certain stops that the resume itself is actually relatively short. It's not bad, but it's certainly uninspiring. I really can't say too much positive about it because it's a defensive hire, and we already know we don't want to do that. We already know we don't want somebody who's this old if we can avoid it. We already know we want somebody who has, if we're going to hire a defensive guy, we want him to be a wizard, not somebody who seems to be somewhat at the mercy of his talent. It's just not enough. No disrespect to him. It seems like he's doing a good job in Cincinnati, but not a good enough job for me to say we should void our principles of trying to give Geno Smith and this offense in general an offensive-minded head coach. All right, so that's it. Those are all the resumes that I got. I just wanted to cover Big Lou here because I felt like the resume was worth a look. I didn't want to pass him over completely here, but admittedly, now that we get to the end of it, it is safe to say there isn't enough here for anybody to get excited about. All right, so probably another video later today, but the plan is tomorrow we're going to take a look at these candidates and see who we like the most and see how we rank things and see what would make us happy going into 2024 and what would make us not so happy. Maybe even a few things that would make us sad. Let me know what you think down below. I'll see you guys later today. Go Hawks, and it's been a fun couple of weeks, but it's time to finally settle down and pick who we actually want to dance with here.